If you're looking to affordably make a little bit more room for a larger set of tires or just for a taller stance overall, well then you should consider adding the Zone Offroad 1.5-inch body lift kit shown here today. Now this kit will include everything needed to lift the body and bumpers on your 09 to 18 Ram at home, and will help you fit a set of 33 by 12.5-inch tires off of right around that mid to high $100 price point. The Zone Offroad kit that we have here today is designed to lift the body of your Ram 1.5 inches both front and rear, which will be a little bit different from your more traditional suspension lift kits found here on the site. Now the body lift, as the name implies, will physically lift both the body and the bumpers on your 4th gen while the suspension remains untouched. Now, because of this style of lift, you're not actually gaining any physical ground clearance here because, again, you're not touching the suspension, but you will be making a little bit more room for a larger wheel and tire combination. Again, 33 by 12.5-inch tire is what Zone currently recommends on their site. Now, I would say the 1.5-inch height that we have here, again, is probably going to be the most popular when we're talking about body lifts, as it will give you a little bit more altitude, but without requiring some of the more hardcore modifications a 3+ inch kit typically would involve. For instance, on those larger body lifts, you have to do things like remove your airbox, lengthen ground straps, add additional steering components, extend fuel filler hose lines, and so forth. Plus, at that point, you are also going to start seeing a little bit more of your frame, which isn't always ideal. Now, with all that being said, guys, you could totally combine a small suspension lift or level with the Zone body lift kit here to ultimately give you the height you're looking for, but without having to go too crazy with additional modifications. In fact, I would highly encourage you to check out some of our customer submitted images back on the product page, if you haven't done so already, of course, just to get a better sense of what this kit might look like by itself, along with running it with maybe an aftermarket level or lift kit, as some owners have done. So again, check those out back on the site if you haven't done so already. But getting back to the kit itself here, guys, and taking a closer look at some of your components, you'll notice the extra altitude in this case is going to come in the form of these body lift blocks here, along with your bumper relocation kits and all of your necessary hardware, making for, I would say, a relatively straightforward bolt-on job. Now, because you're not going too crazy high here, the gaps between the frame really shouldn't be all that noticeable like they would with a larger 3+ body lift kit, and therefore should maintain stock-like ride quality. But now let's get into the install, and the site is going to call this a soft 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter and a full day to knock out from start to finish, which I feel might be a tad strong. But regardless, to give you a better idea of what you're in for, feel free to check out our detailed walkthrough and tool breakdown from an AT customer now.
Given that this is a larger job, you are going to need quite a few more tools. Now we're just going to go from right to left here. First of all, you're going to need some safety glasses, especially working under the truck. If dirt falls on your face, keeps it out of your eyes. It's awesome. You're gonna want some hearing protection because you will have to use a grinder to cut some stuff out. Torque wrench, grinder obviously. You're gonna want a cutoff wheel, and then if you like to smooth things over, you're gonna want a hard rock or a flap disc, something like that. Some open end wrenches, make the job easier. Loctite, you can use Loctite blue or you can use the Loctite that came with the kit. The Loctite that came with the kit is Loctite red, so you wouldn't really be able to undo it ever again. So I just used blue. You're gonna want a breaker bar, 3/8 minimum, 1/2 inch is recommended, just because you are gonna need a lot of torque to get those body bolts out. You're gonna want a drill with a drill bit that can cut metal, just like this. And with the drill, you're gonna want a center punch in order to mark those holes where you're gonna have to drill in the front bumper plates. You're gonna need a jack. I used a bottle jack in my instruction, but a floor jack would work just fine. Just something that can lift the body off the frame about 6 to 8 inches, because you're gonna unload the suspension, and then you're gonna need another 1.5 inches of clearance. Really gonna need 2 inches of clearance to get the puck in there. So something that can lift up the body 6 to 8 inches will be just fine for you. You're gonna need the vehicle's stock spare tire removal kit. You're gonna want some form of extension bar for breaking loose the body and cab mount bolts. I just used a large open end wrench. I stuck the end of the breaker bar into here. That helped me get leverage on it. You're gonna want a rag, clean stuff up while you're under there. Always make sure things go together cleaner. They're gonna last longer. You're gonna need a hammer of some sort. Recommend a sledgehammer, it's the easiest to use, especially because you're gonna have to use it in some tight spaces, so having that extra weight on the end of the hammer is gonna help a lot. And then a socket set, I use a combination of a 3/8 drive and a 1/2" drive. You could get away with either of them, but if you're gonna go with one or the other, I'd recommend 1/2" drive because you're gonna need a lot of leverage. You know, you're dealing with body mount bolts, cab mount bolts, bumper mount bolts, and that's about it. You're really gonna want a lot of leverage on those ones. As for the trim pieces, such as the bumper cover, you know, they're 10 mils, so you can use an open end wrench, which is what I use, easy enough. You're gonna need a flathead screwdriver. An open end crescent wrench helps a lot when you're dealing with nuts and bolt combinations. You can just hold the nut with the crescent wrench, easily adjustable, and that's that. You're gonna want some pliers. I use needle nose pliers. This helps you get off the electrical clips from under the truck, easy enough. And finally, some form of touch-up paint or something to seal off certain parts whenever you grind off something, you remove the paint from the metal. I use it on the bumper, I use it on the frame horns in the back, I used it on the front where we drill the holes. You really just want to cover up that exposed metal, otherwise it's going to rust out real quick.
So once you've got your tools and you got your safety glasses on, step one is to come to this driver's side front fender and take off this ground strap here because that's going to get caught as soon as we lift up the cab. And that ground strap nut is going to be a 10 mil. I'm just using a deep well socket and a ratchet to take it off. You're going to want to remove the negative post from the battery. You can remove the positive as well if you'd like, but the negative will be good enough. And that way, if it touches the chassis, it's just going to be shorting to itself, so it won't short anything. But if your positive touches something on the chassis it's not supposed to, it might short itself through the battery. So to take off this fan shroud, which you're going to have to do because the lift is going to bring this up and it'll hit the fan. So just take off the bottom of it. You're going to have to push the section here with these two clips up while pulling these ears down because it's a double interlocking mechanism there. But once you get that out, there we go. Once you get those clips off, they should just drop right out of there. And typically you're gonna have a shroud here. It's gonna be just like a flat piece of felt or whatever they make it out of. It's gonna come off with some Christmas tree clips. Just pop those up, pull it off. I haven't had mine for a while, so this is what we're dealing with. Next, you're gonna wanna take off the 4 bolts for the grill because we're gonna need to access some bolts for the front bumper. So for this grill here, you're gonna have to use a 10 mil, using a 3/8 ratchet. You can just take off all of these. They should be relatively loose. So there's that one, there's the second one, third one, and then the fourth one is right over here. So to get this grill off after taking out these bolts, it's pretty much just gonna pull forward like that. You might have to pull on the lower section, pull it out, up a little bit maybe. It should just pop out eventually if you work it enough. There you go. It's really gonna feel like you're breaking it, but you can get it off easy enough. Next, you're gonna want to take off these 2 bolts here to hold the headlights on both sides. Be one facing forward and one facing vertically. Those are gonna be 10 mils. When you're taking stuff apart, it's obviously a good idea to keep track of your hardware and know which bolts go where. So put them in bags or trays, or I typically sometimes just thread them back into where they came out of just slightly, just so I know that they go in that spot. Next, you're going to want to go into this passenger side fender well. You're going to have to go on the driver's side as well. It's going to be the same process for both sides. Go into here. There should be this removable flap here. Go ahead. I'm going to use a flathead. You can use a proper trim. You can use a proper trim piece tool remover. But I'm just going to use a flathead and pop this Christmas tree clip out of here to get this flap open. Easy enough. Pull this flap out of the way. So once you get in here, you're just gonna have to remove this 10 mil bolt here to get that headlight the rest of the way out. But you're gonna have to do this to get access to the bumper bolts to get the bumper off, because we have to raise that. Now I got that bolt out. So another part to removing the headlights is up in here. There's a white lever looking thing in there. See if I can get to it. This right here. And you're gonna have to push that up in order to release that headlight. As you can see, it moved up quite a bit there. And when you move it up, it's gonna make a nice click noise for you. So you can kind of, then to remove the headlight, just pull forward on it. Now, there was this little ball joint that was getting caught in this socket, so that's why you gotta pull on it kind of hard. So to remove your turn signal clip, you're gonna have to pull back on that red locking tab and then push down on the little ear there. Same thing for this other part of the harness here with this green one. Push that red tab back, click on the little ear to take it out. And she just comes out just like that. Boom. And then you'll have to take care of these zip ties here. I'm probably just gonna cut them off. Oh, never mind. They just pop right out with the Christmas tree clips. And look at that. You have your headlight removed. So now do the same thing on the other side. So after you have the headlights removed on both sides, it's gonna be the same thing. You just need to go into here, and then this threads here is gonna be connected to a bolt head back in here. It's gonna be a 10 mil. You have to take that out, as well as this bolt here. With the sport models, this is gonna be a one-piece plastic bumper. There's gonna be multiple of these. For my truck, there's only one. Gotta take out both of those screws so we can continue removing the bumper. Now once you have those bolts undone, on the inside of the fender and on the outside of the bumper, you can just pull forward on the clips. Come undone. They're gonna have little hooks on them. You just gotta work it out just like that. Just like that, you have your valence piece removed. Alright, so there's two bolts on either side of this section here, this plastic section, shortly after I remove them. So coming in from the driver's side of the vehicle, these two bolts we are currently removing on either side of this valence piece here are going to be right here, the one that the wrench is on, and slightly lower under there. See if I can't get this wrench off. There's another one right here that you're gonna wanna loosen up also. So under the vehicle, looking forward, at each frame rail plate, there's gonna be 3 bolts for the bumper. One on the inside, and then there's going to be 2 more on the outside. You can see all 3 of them there. They're all gonna be 18 mil. And there's really no good way to get an angle on it while undoing it, so I'm just gonna show them to you, point them out. That one up there, this one right here, and this one right here. Same thing for the other side. Those 2 right there, and then the last one is up there. And then the reason we removed the bolts for this centerpiece earlier is that we can move it out of the way to gain access to the bumper bolts that you can see poking out there, because you can't really get good access from the bottom. Now I just pulled this up. You know, it normally sits down here. But we loosened the bolts for it, and you can take the Christmas tree clips off for this little air dam piece here, but I found it easiest just to pull this forward, work it up just like that. There's 2, and then that third one is gonna be the one on the inner side of the frame rails, which we took a look at earlier from under the truck. That one is easy to access under the truck and undo under the truck, but these outer 2, you definitely wanna get them from up here.
So earlier we had undone the clip for that fog light. However, over here, there's a main clip that goes to the bumper and is located right here on the driver's side of the vehicle. And this one is going to take care of both fog lights. That way we don't have to worry about it.
So right here, looking from the driver's side, this wire right here, it runs down to the fog lights. This is the harness. You're gonna wanna slide this forward off of the slider in there, and then push down on the top of this here, and they should come apart.
Now, you should be able to just grab the bumper, slide it forward, and remove it from the truck. I'm gonna take it off this way on the side of the railing. Yep, it's definitely loose. Work it forward and around the tow hooks.
All right, so starting from back to front, locating these body and bed mount bolts is pretty easy. The first one is going to be here, up through the hitch. It's the bolt up there. And then moving forward, there's going to be 4 on the bed. So on this side, there's going to be 2. The other one is right up there. The next body mount is right there. We've loosened it up already. We need to take it out the rest of the way. And then the next body mount is right there. He's working on it. Moving up the truck further. I believe there's one more up here. Yep, right here. We'll have to loosen that one. That one's directly in front of the door. The one under the front of the truck is right there. And it's the same on both sides. You need to take off all these bolts.
So, these are the 4 cab mounting bolts from the driver, or passenger side, excuse me. And basically what's gonna happen is that for this rear one, we're gonna keep this big block, and we're gonna take one of our 150 mil bolts here. We're gonna put a 12 mil washer that's provided in the kit, and we're gonna put it just in the same spot that original bolt was with the thick block. These other ones, we're gonna have to remove the washer using something such as a vise here and a hammer. But you need to remove the washer from the bolt, and then as soon as you do that, you put another 150 mil bolt in its place, and then we'll have our extended hardware here ready to go on with the factory large washers on them. Doesn't take too much force, just enough to break them washers free. I would clean it with a wire brush, just get some of that corrosion off of there. You know, just like that. Maybe clean it with some soap and water if you want. It's not that important, it's just gonna be under the car. But for me, I just want some of that corrosion, dirt and debris and stuff all cleared out of there. Looks to be about as good as it's gonna get. Same thing for the others. It's really just that flanged part of the bolt that you gotta get it off of. It's kind of annoying, but you'll get through it quick enough. Same thing, wire brush. Just getting some of that corrosion off of there. Now if your washers have completely corroded through, obviously you need to replace them. Mine have not, they're just slightly corroded and just need a quick cleanup. Which is easy enough. Just like that, got all the washers transferred over. Now what we're gonna do, we're gonna go over to the truck. We're gonna put a jack on the pinch welds, on the structurally supported pinch welds the cab, jack it up on the passenger side because we removed the bolts on this side and we only loosened the bolts on the driver's side. So this way when we tilt it up on the passenger side, it's not gonna fall off the frame. That would be catastrophic. So we've left a few bolts on the driver's side, and the body mounts are rubber, so they'll flex a little bit while we're installing these lift blocks on the side. Alright, so what I've done here is I've grabbed my widest piece of 2x4 and I got the bottle jack out. Basically, I'm gonna put this 2x4 under the pinch weld for the cab, approximately centered in the cab. That way it spreads out the weight. And then I'll use the bottle jack, push it up the rest of the way. So we maxed out the jack, and it wasn't enough. So I'm gonna add another 2x4. Hopefully keep it to just 2. It's not very safe to have a ton of 2x4 stacked on top of the jack. Actually, in fact, we're gonna stick it under the jack, make it safer. Always be watching these pinch welds, see if they're about starting to collapse, because that would be no good. The blocks are pretty self-explanatory. They're just gonna go between the frame and the body. I'm gonna throw in 3 of them and then I'll show throwing in the last one. Look it up close. Basically what I've done with all the other body mounts along the side of the cab here, there's 3 others on this side, is I went up to them, I've wiped down the body mount itself with the wet rag, made sure I got it as clean as possible. And once you've got those clean, you're gonna wanna take your spacer block here, you just set it right there on top of the body mount. Then take your hardware with your OEM washer, feed it up through the bottom of the body mount, and then you're gonna have to move it around a little bit to make sure it gets lined up properly. Then after you have that lined up, you can line it up with the cab and begin to thread that bolt into place. And after you get the thread started, you know, they're gonna be a little sticky because the Loctite and the nuts aren't exactly fixated on the cab. They're just in there with the washer that's cut to keep them from moving side to side. So after you have all of the blocks in place and the hardware threads are started, you're gonna wanna lower the cab on top of those blocks, make sure nothing bad happens. And then you're not gonna take them out and Loctite them and tighten them right away. You're gonna wait to do that till we have all of the blocks on the driver's side as well. And then we'll torque them all after everything's all up and leveled out. So now we're gonna do the same thing over here we did on that side. Simply just toss this jack under here. Now as we're going around to all the body mount bolts, what you're gonna wanna do is just make sure that they all thread into the threads without binding up and without a ton of resistance. And as long as that's good, then what you're gonna wanna do is, right after you Loctite them, you wanna snug them down with your typical socket wrench. And then you're gonna wanna grab yourself a torque wrench, just like this here unit. And you're gonna wanna set it to 65 foot-pounds. Boom, just like that. And then use your torque wrench to tighten down the bolts. So here we're just gonna get a better angle as to what I've been doing. Because we had all the bolts threaded in lately, I'm just gonna bust this one out real quick. Because we didn't Loctite them before, we just made sure they were threaded in so that everything lined up when we lifted up and lowered the cab.
just gonna take out that bolt there. And then basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little bit of Loctite glue. I'm just gonna put a little bit on the first third of the thread, I guess. And that way, even if it does thread all the way up to here, it's gonna get the Loctite pushed on to the lower threads. And that'll be taking care of itself. This one I put a little bit much Loctite. I didn't have to put that much. Now we're just gonna take our socket, snug it up all the way, and then we'll use the torque wrench to do the final torque spec on it. And snug her down the last little bit. Perfect. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the driver's side. I'm not gonna show you because it's the same exact thing. Okay, so for this bed, there's gonna be 6 bolts, 3 on each side of the frame. I'm only gonna show you the passenger side because the driver's side is the exact same, just inverted. So the first bolt that we're gonna be dealing with is right here. And it's gonna be the one bolt that's in front of the rear end for the bed, and the other 2 are gonna be behind the differential. So let's take care of this one first. Need to be using an 18 mil socket, I believe. Just like that, we got that first one out. Now let's move to the back of this passenger side to get those last 2 out on this side. And then we're gonna loosen the driver's side bolts to give it about a 1/4 inch of clearance under the bolt head, so that when we jack up this side of the bed, it doesn't fall off the frame, but it's not gonna bend the bed because there are no rubber mounts for the bed, it's just directly bolted to the frame. Alrighty, now to take care of these 2 bolts back here, are gonna be looking at a bolt up this hole. So this is gonna be the main tube for your hitch receiver. And then through that hole, there's gonna be a bolt in there at the top of the frame rail, and that's gonna be bolted to the bed. Now the third and final bolt is gonna be through this hole in the frame, which is in alignment with this cross member here that holds the spare tire. There's gonna be a hole there as well. And through that hole is the last bolt we have to take out. Bolt number 2 out. Last but not least, up through the receiver. There we go. Perfect. Now off to the driver's side, where we're gonna loosen the bolts and give them about a 1/4 inch of clearance onto the bolt head. I'm just gonna do mine about 2 or 3 turns out. I don't know if that's gonna be about a 1/4 inch clearance. If you can see it, give it that much clearance. If not, just do 2 or 3 turns out and we'll be fine. So coming in from the passenger side, you're gonna wanna remove this plastic trim piece here and pull out this toolkit, because you're gonna need to use this toolkit here in order to remove the spare tire, because we're gonna have to put spacer blocks on the mounting bolts for the spare tire hoist so that it lines up properly with the new body height. Open this up, get out all the tools. And I believe the hook is the part that actually removes the tire. This just goes together like a nice long extended rod. So to take care of this jack, or the spare tire, you're gonna wanna take this extension piece from the jack hardware kit that does not have a clip on the end of it. You're gonna feed it into the hole. And then shortly thereafter, take the piece with the hook on it, hook it onto there, the proper location, and then feed it into the hole, and you'll have to line it up with the bullhorn in there. Once you line it up with the bullhorn, you'll have to get it into the actual square head that's in there. And then after you do that, you're just gonna take the wrench portion of it, feed it onto this hook here, and then start twisting it. So to get this spare tire off of the jack, what you're gonna wanna do is lower it all the way to the ground, using the horn up here. And then after you have it on the ground, you're gonna wanna lift up one edge of the tire. You're gonna have to bring this piece all the way up past this steel shaft here. Then you're gonna have to twist it this way in order to squeeze it out of the hub of the wheel.
So real quick, before we head under the truck, just prepare your hardware. Make sure you got all 6 blocks under there with you. Make sure you got all of your shorter bolts that came with the kit. I believe they're 75 mil long. You're gonna wanna put the washers that came with the kit on those bolts before you get under there. Make sure you have some Loctite with you. However, same thing as the cab. We're gonna put all of the spacers and bolts into place before we tighten and Loctite all of them. What I mean by that is we're gonna jack up the passenger side, put in the 3 blocks and bolt combinations for this side loosely. Then we're gonna jack up the driver's side. Same thing over there, put in the blocks, put in the bolts. And then after that, what's gonna happen is we're going to make sure that they all tighten and loosen freely, and then we're gonna Loctite all of them and torque them all down to spec, which is 65 foot-pounds. Same setup as the cab. I just have 2 2x4s under the bottle jack, 1 on top of it to spread the weight on the pinch wheel to the bed. This is gonna be a lot easier. The bed doesn't weigh anything compared to the cab. So just jack it up until you have enough clearance to throw the blocks on there. Now the easiest way to tell when you have enough height on there is to look at the body lines, and when the bed is a little taller than the cab, you know you're good because the cab already has the 1.5 inch spacers in there. And so if you go, I don't know, what is this, about 1 inch higher than the cab's body line, then we have plenty of clearance in there to slip these spacer blocks in there. I find it easiest to always check, take the spacer block, make sure you have enough room between the cab and the frame, which we do. I had to do a few extra pumps from the body lines being uneven. Now I'm gonna go grab a wet rag just to wipe off any dust that's gonna be up between those 2 surfaces, slip on the block, and slip in the bolt loosely. All clean. Wipe off the block as well while you're at it. Stick that in there and then get the bolt loosely installed. I'm just gonna start the threads because we are gonna have to take them all out and do Loctite when it's time to torque them down. Same thing for these few back here, for these couple back here. You're just gonna wanna go up and feel approximately from where the hole is. Make sure you give it a nice quick wipe down. Because we jacked up from the front of the truck, I have a feeling that we're going to either need to bring that jack back here or jack it up a little more from up there because of the way the leveraging works. There we go. Now that it slid on up there just above this hole, yep, we're gonna have to use the extension with the socket in order to get this up into its proper place. But first, just in the name of safety, we're gonna put this other block in there so that if the jack fails or whatever the case may be, it's not gonna damage anything. So same thing, wipe it down with that rag. on top of the frame rail and then wipe down the bed where it's gonna mount. And stick our spacer up in there. Now we're simply gonna take our socket on our extension and feed it up into the hole, make sure it lines up with our spacer. And then start threading it into the bed, ideally. There we go. Finally got it there. I just gotta see if it threads into the bed. And we got the thread started for it. Now we're gonna take this third one for this side, take it up through here. This one you can kind of see the hole of where you're aiming for. Get it through the spacer a little quicker and then feed it up into the bed. And we're gonna leave these ones loose until we get the other side in, and then we'll take them all out, Loctite them, and torque them down. But for now, lower the jack on this side. Same thing as this side for the driver's side, just jack it up, put the spacers in after cleaning up the surfaces, feed the bolts in, and then we'll pick up from there. This next part's pretty simple. We're just gonna drop out all 3 bolts on both sides of the bed, Loctite them, put them back up, and torque them down to 65 foot-pounds. Alright. There's already going to be Loctite in there from the factory, so really only have to do a little bit. On the last third there's what I did. And then back up. Snugged up. Torque wrench set to 65. There we go. Just add it to the last third. Now off to the front one. This one's probably going to be the easiest. Just because it's got the easiest access. Yes, that's roughly, that one's about a third. I was doing half on some of them instead. So. Just like that, we're all done with all the pucks. A nice little reference point to see how much the truck has been lifted is right here on the bumper. This top of the bumper here used to be in alignment with this body line, and with the spacers, it's about 1.5 inches up now. This is the easiest way I found to visualize it. If you can't really tell the before and after from the before and after photos, this is a good way to tell that it does have some lift to it. And funny enough, this actually lines up with this, almost. So it almost looks natural, but yeah. So first, to put the front bumper back on, you're gonna wanna clean off the mounting surfaces, Always keep it cleanly. You're gonna have a more successful install at that point. This kit does not come with provisions to keep factory tow hooks, so you're gonna have to take these out. There is a pin here to keep them aligned, and that's gonna get in the way of the brackets. And because we're raising the bumper and there's no way to raise these factory tow hooks, you're just gonna have to take them out. And if you can fit them after you put the bumper on, great, but they're not gonna fit. So unfortunately, you're gonna lose that feature, but such is the way of things, I suppose. It's gonna be an 18 mil socket, just like all the hardware for the body mounts. And there's a third bolt, which is still an 18, and that's going to be towards the back on the bottom where this tow hook is going to mount to the frame. Just like that, got this sucker out. Now we can continue with the install. So next, there's a tab here for the bracket face that has been bent back from factory bumper installation, and the kit wants you to bump this back forward with something just like a sledgehammer. There you go. Now what you're going to want to do is grab a Sharpie, something to mark with. It doesn't have to be a Sharpie. You can use a soapstone or a pencil or paint, whatever you want. I'm going to grab a bracket, and just like that, that's going to fit perfectly on there. But we want to raise this up a little bit because these most outer four holes are where the bumper is going to drill into or bolt into. The bracket's going to essentially go on like this because we have about 1.5 inches of height that we need to add to it. So it'll end up sitting something like this with these two kind of oddly placed holes sitting in the top of the bracket, and then that'll move the top holes for the bumper 1.5 inches up. And then we need to mark these, so you want to get this as centered as you can. Probably best to just mark it off of this hole. Since it's just one hole, you can't really mess with that one at all. Just like that, and then get it lined up level. Boom. You could clamp this. I'm just gonna hold it and mark it. There you go. Now once you have these two sections marked, you're gonna want to grab a center punch and punch the exact center of them, because we're gonna have to drill those out to 1/2 inch. Just like that. Now it's gonna be easiest to just take a step bit or something of the like and just drill right through there to 1/2 inch. And then we'll get to installing the rest of the brackets. I like to use WD-40 or some other kind of light lubricant, thread cutting oil. Thread cutting oil doesn't necessarily work. It's meant for more slow cutting process. Just something to keep the tip of the drill bit cooled off that's not water, because you're gonna oxidize stuff at that point. But as always, clean off your mating surfaces as best you can. And then what you're gonna wanna do for both sides is take the thick washers that came with the kit. You're gonna wanna slip one over the top stud on each side of the bumper. If you don't do this, it's gonna warp the brackets all crazy and it's not gonna work the way you want it to. You really want to mainly get the big debris off of there without causing any misalignment issues. And stick the thick washer on the top stud there. That one's a little loose, might want to tighten that lock washer if you have a way to. Doesn't matter much, it's going to just get pulled tight anyways. And now you're going to want to go throw this back on the front of the truck and go from there. Alright, so now that you have your two holes drilled, you're going to want to have these brackets handy and nearby, because as soon as we get this bumper on there, we're going to end up having to put this bracket in here just like this. And then it's going to go over these two studs, and then the upper studs for the bumper, or the upper stud I should say, is going to go into one of these holes here. And that's why we have a flat washer that's super thick on the upper stud of the bumper, is because there's going to be a gap between this bracket and the faceplate. So that's going to take care of that gap. Now let's go grab that bumper and throw the bumper on the truck first, and then we'll worry about the bracket. Yep. Come over here. Let's find that washer it fell off. Now we're just gonna stick this washer down here. We'll go grab the hardware. Get this stuff together. Before we finish that, you're just gonna want to grab the bracket with the tabs facing backwards. Stick it down from on top of the frame rail. And fit it on over the top of all the studs. There we go. Let me get a different camera angle so I can show you putting on all the nuts. So go ahead, slap some Loctite on at least a couple of the nuts. Then after you do that, start feeding them nuts on. Have to get them rest way tight later. There you go. Now just snug them down. Don't tighten them yet. Once you get all 6 bolts on for both frame rails, then you're going to want to center the bumper to the best of your ability, and then you're going to want to snug them down to 65 foot-pounds. So go ahead, snug down all 6 bolts for this here bumper. You want to do it evenly side to side, so now that that's all tightened up, we're going to move on to this valence piece here. So now we're going to take this valence support piece here,
stick it back into the truck. If you busted off the Christmas tree clips that were holding on the air dam for it, you're gonna wanna put new Christmas tree clips on those. Make sure that air dam keeps air flowing through the rad. Make sure that's all good there. Pretty simple piece to put on. Just make sure it gets lined up with the holes. And then grab the hardware for it. I'm gonna be using a 10 mil. I'm gonna use an open end, a ratcheting open end to install the pieces here. And there's gonna be 2 bolts per side, so 4 bolts total. And you don't want to tighten these pieces until you have all the bolts in, because if it's off angle, like it's off angle right now, if I tighten the crap out of this, I wouldn't be able to fit any of the other bolts in there without warping the piece really badly. So now we're just going to take our upper bumper cover, whatever they want to call this, plastic piece, and start feeding it into these little clips down here. Got these little harpoons on the cover. You want to feed it into the support. And you're going to have to direct it to the fenders for it to get installed properly. There we go. Now we're going to have to do the 10 mil bolts up in this corner that line up in the fender. So let's go grab those. Now when you come back here, you're going to want to get the bumper cover piece on this side of the fender liner. Might take some finagling. Alright. And then once you've got that just like that, you're going to take the bolt that was here before, just snug that down, and then we're going to work on the headlights after that. Next, you're just going to want to throw on your headlights. Pretty simple. Take the turn signal clip, plug that onto the headlight housing. Push it on until you hear or feel a click, and then you should be able to push the red locking tab downwards. But you'll lock it into place so you don't lose headlights or turn signals while you're driving. Next, you're going to want to take the 2 pigtails for the headlamp and push those together. This one you're going to have to really crank down on it to hear that click. Once it clicks, just go ahead and push that red locking tab towards the mouth of the clip again, and you're good to go. Now we're going to push it back onto this ball socket, just like we took it off. And just like that, you're going to hear a click when it gets in that ball socket. And now we're going to have to go grab our hardware for the bolts right here and here. Clamp those down, but before we do that, we're just going to lock it into place on the rear end, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So the way you're going to want to lock this into place is up here, this plastic clip that my middle finger is on. You're going to want to pull that down, just like that. Now your headlight is locked into place. All you have to do is go throw those bolts on in the front, and you'll be good for this side. And it's going to be the same thing on the driver's side. To wrap things up, you're just going to want to push this flap up into place. Put the Christmas tree clip back in. Everything's good to go. Next step is to simply put on the grill. You're going to need 4 fasteners. 2 with a finer thread like this one, and 1 with a coarser thread like this one. The coarse threads are going to go on the outer 2 bolts for the grill, and the fine threads are going to go in the center, right here into the core support. First things first, you just want to pop in the tabs on the bottom. Here you go. And then start the threads on the top. They're all going to be 10 mil. like that, you have your grill back on. Now this factory ground strap on the driver's side fender well we took off earlier, it would be stretched pretty tight if we left it on this factory stud. Wouldn't be stretched very super tight to damage anything. I think you'd be fine with it. But the kit comes with a bracket to relocate it anyways. So you're gonna want to take one of the provided serrated washers, put it over the stud, just like that. And then you're gonna want to take the bracket itself with the factory nut and put it on there just like so. Taking your factory nut on there to tighten it down. And you must use the serrated washer on the frame side of things so that it chews through the paint on the bracket. And you want to find where that's relaxed and just put that about where that needs to be. Just like that. Make sure the tab goes around the end there. There you go. And give it a little more angle, there we go. Now this one's gonna be a 10 mil. So tighten that down plenty snug to where it makes a good electrical connection with the frame. Next, you're going to want to put the other serrated washer onto the extension. Stick that wire on there. And then tighten down the nut until you're confident it's making a good ground connection. And the nut provided with the kit is actually going to be a 7/16 locking nut, which will work just fine. Now that that's all tightened up, if you haven't already, you want to torque your bumper bolts down to 65 foot-pounds. So looking at the driver's side, the passenger side frame rail, from the drive shaft, right here, there's going to be some rubber bed supports, and they're going to be under this bed frame rail that is not bolted to the frame. And we need to take these spacers from the kit and some plastic push pin trees to relocate these supports. Now you're going to want to remove the rubber so the rubber contacts the bed, and then we'll put the spacer in here and we'll put the spacer just directly on the frame. Now there are 4 of these, and you want to do this while the bed is loosely bolted in, just in case you need to bump up the bed a little bit to get them all in place. Now there's one rubber bed support that is not bolted. There's 2 actually on this frame rail here, one on the passenger side, one on the driver's side. And then just back there, behind the rear end here, is another support. And this cross member here is actually where that support's going to be resting on. So, that frame rail right there, there's going to be 2 more. So right here we have the bed support spacer blocks, and you have to pull the rubber grommet out of the frame of the truck. That's not terrible, you just have to pull up on it pretty hard. Getting it into this block is a pain. Like, it's really hard. I ended up having to crimple the nipple of it, so the tip of this rubber piece, pretty much had to roll it up real tight, push it through, and then use a tiny pick of mine that had a blunt tip on it to pop that curve out of there, and now it fits in there just fine. See if I can show you real quick. Fits in there just like that. And then you have to take your Christmas tree pin and then put it in there just like that, and then go slip this between the frame and the truck bed, and then push this clip down, it'll be all taken care of. All right, now the second clip is gonna be right here, and it's just a rubber grommet you gotta pull up on it out of the frame. Just like that. And then that comes out of there easy enough. It's gonna be the same thing on the driver's side. And then, like we had showed before, the front pins are gonna be up in front of the axle. As always, you wanna be as clean as you can be with these installations. So, I'm not too worried. It's really not going to change how this reacts, but clean that up a little bit just with my hand, and then sneak this into here. Same rinse and repeat process of pulling out the rubber grommet and putting the spacer in there. So this is the rubber bed support spacer in its proper location. That Christmas tree clip is almost in place. It's probably going to be easiest to just use something like a flathead screwdriver or something of the equivalent to help push it down. There we go. Oh, still got to go a little more. Yeah. Almost got it. Just got to go down a little more. But with space and leverage being limited, definitely want to try using something like a screwdriver to help you get some force on there. And that's probably about as good as that's going to get. This thing's probably going to rattle around a little bit anyways. So, do the same thing for all of them. I'm going to try and line up that spacer there with the hole. So you kind of want to give it your best feel using just your fingers. You can get an eye on there to see where the hole's at. Do that as well. And if you're unsure, just take your Christmas tree clip and start feeding it in there. If it goes into the hole, then you're lined up. If it doesn't, then you're not. Helps to use two hands, one hand to guide the tip, and the other hand to force it down. My clip does not want to go down, so I am obviously not aligned. Fully seated. You want to try and make the head as flat as possible. That way the thing is as centered as it can be. And there you go. Good as it's gonna get. So for this driver's side front bed support, what you're gonna want to do is just come in from the back. Since we have the spare tire out, you can fit in here a lot more comfortably. This is an airline, so you probably won't have that in the way in your truck, unless you have airbags. But the easiest way is definitely to come in from the back, and you can see what you're doing. Move that airline out of the way. Slide this into place. Oh, shot it. Just trying to feel for that hole, Then grab your Christmas tree clip and fit her in there. Now the orientation of these spacer blocks doesn't really matter. You can orient them parallel or perpendicular with the little subframe of the bed. There we go. There we go. I'm just feeling the head to make sure it's as flush as it can be. Make sure we're centered. And move over just a little bit. There we go. Move it back a little bit, not too much. There we go. And just like that, we're all done. So the first step in removing this bumper to get it spaced up to look flush with the body, you gotta take off your trailer pin harness, which is just a little push tab on the top. Just squeeze that down and pull it out. Just like that. And then you're gonna have to deal with your license plate lights, which for these, it's easy to just twist them lefty-loosey, the whole assembly, and then the whole light and housing will come out with it. Just like that. But if you're doing that, you're going to want to move it out of the way so that it's safe from getting hurt from anything. And do that on both sides. Lefty loosey, pull the whole thing out. For me, I have auxiliary lights, so I'm going to have to unplug those right here. And then I'll have to unplug them right here, excuse me. That way nothing will get caught when I pull this bumper off. Just like that.
And for the backup sensors, if you have them, there's going to be a main clip up here. Get a better angle on that. There's going to be a main clip right here that you want to take care of. And this one is also just a push tab. So push down here and then pull this side out. Now we got to undo the bolts. Just drop out these 2 bumper bolts. It's kind of hard to see them with the exhaust in the way. These 2 bolts right here need to come out next. These 2 bolts need to come out next. And then we'll do the same thing on the driver's side of the vehicle, and we'll be able to pull out the bumper at that point. That's tight. Now for the second one, you're going to want to take it out the majority of the way, but leave it barely threaded into place so that when you take off the other bolt from the other side, if this decides to fall, it's not going to fall all the way off and hurt you. It's already loosened up there. Helps to support the bumper a little bit. That's nice and light. Now, what you're gonna have to do is these studs right here on the frame, you're gonna likely have to use a cutoff wheel to cut the back of the head off, which is on the other side of the frame from where I'm sitting. And then after you do that, you'll have to drill out these holes to 1/2 inch. After you grind off the head from that stud on this side and you pop it out with a hammer, go ahead and drill it out to 1/2 inch. And do the same on the other side. So now we're going to take our 13mm deep well socket with a ratcheting end wrench. Socket wrench, my bad. We're going to use that to take off the 2 bolts holding on the spare tire winch. There's one of them. And then here's the other one. This next part's not too difficult. You're just going to want to locate the nut under here, which is right here, and then go ahead and try and line up this winch with this spacer in between the nut of the cross member. There we go. And then put the winch on top of it. Grab the bolt. Do your best here to line it up properly.
Start threading it in. There we go. Same thing for the other bolt. And then you're gonna want to tighten them down to 18 foot-pounds once you got that going. Using that 13 mil deep well socket. Go ahead and torque these down to 18 foot-pounds. Both sides here. Now remove these little U-nuts right here. There's a tab you have to lift up on. So it's just stay locked into place. After you lift up on that tab, it'll come right out. You're going to want to push that tab back down so that it locks onto the new piece. Now clean up this little bracket. Take your hex head 1/2 inch hardware from the kit, throw a dab of Loctite on it. You're gonna want to stick them into this bracket. They have sunk heads so that they'll sit flush. Stick those back in there. You're gonna have 2 larger nuts with serrated edges on them. Put on the back of those. There's no torque spec for these, but make sure you get them good and tight, because this is, you know, 1/3 of the bumper's mounting power. There we go. Now before the next step of mounting this step spacer onto the truck, you're gonna want to line it up on this part. You can just line it up flush with this line here. Then you're gonna want to center it and mark out where it needs to be clearanced. Because when it sits in here, it's gonna sit flush against here. And you're gonna need more clearance, obviously, as this bumper get caught. So just mark it out just like that. Don't let it move. Just wipe down this faceplate here. Then grab yourself grab the bracket down just like that. It's actually going to be easiest if you take your hardware. Well, you have to feed that up to the bottom. Alright. Stick a nut in the washer on the inside, just like that. Both sides. Washer nut. And then feed everything together with a bolt that has a washer on it from the bottom. Both sides. These are locking washers, so you don't have to worry about Loctite or anything. And just tighten those down snug.
Now, as for this bumper, if you have the plastic one, don't worry about this. But if you have a chrome bumper like mine, it's actually just chrome plated metal. So you're gonna want to clean up these edges with a file or something. And then take some touch-up paint or some form of rust reducer or rust preventer, I guess. So basically paint. And just wipe some paint all around here. Just because if you don't, it will rust. And that's not good. So a little bit of paint won't hurt nothing. So if your bumper's like mine, you're gonna notice that these bolts just pull out of the hole. So my plan is to just take them off, leave this on top of there just to help me line up the bumper, and then once I have the bumper all bolted up, I'm just gonna take it out so it doesn't fall off on the road. Now, for these brackets, this hole here needs to be drilled out to a 1/2 inch, and the slot on the other side needs to be drilled out to a 1/2 inch. So we're just gonna go ahead and take care of that real quick. Same thing for the slot on this side. Just try and keep it centered. It'd be easier if you had a normal drill bit for this, but here's what you got. Just like that, ready to go back on the truck. Now remember, before you put the new bumper on, you're gonna want to put these factory U-nuts back onto here, so that the hardware has somewhere to go. Because if it ain't got nowhere to go, it ain't gonna work. I'll just throw the bumper up there. Put these factory bolts back into place. Now that you got this up here, make sure you select the right hardware. It's going to be these bolts with a cone tip on them and a washer. They should fit right in there easily without any resistance. I'd have to pick up the bumper a little bit. Now make sure to leave them screws loose while we go under and put on the other 4 bolts. So after you install the body lift fully, what you're going to want to do is go through all the bolts, check the torques, make sure all the body and cab mount bolts are at 65 foot-pounds, front bumper bolts 65 foot-pounds, make sure that the spare tire winch is 18 foot-pounds if you can still get to it. And you're going to want to check a few things up here mainly. You're going to want to check your brake lines. For example, these ones especially, and the other brake lines that will be mounted to the cab, because the cab is now further from the frame where the brake lines will be mounted. So you want to check down in there, make sure nothing's too tight. I can move this up and down and nothing's kinked, so it's fine. You really shouldn't have any issues with this. You want to make sure that these cables aren't stretched too tight. Make sure that they're, nothing's going to be catastrophically tight that's going to snap off while you're driving. Because if you lose the ground, you lose the motor, that's not good. I also checked wires down there that came out of the cab that I ran for aftermarket stuff. Those have plenty of clearance on them. They have plenty of length still. Really don't have to worry about too much with the smaller body lift. If you had a taller body lift, you'd have to worry about more, but you should be just fine just like this. You're going to want to check all the grounds. Just look in the engine bay, look under the truck, look front to back. Make sure nothing is stretched super tight. If it is, you want to change that. But the major thing you want to check out for is up here. Make sure that these brake lines are solid and they're not stretched tight. So for these bumper brackets, you're going to want to keep the notched part up and feed your hardware through. This bracket is going to go between the frame horn. So get that first bolt going in there.
You just want to get it finger tight so that if you have to adjust the bumper, you can. Alright, now take your next bolt, washer, and nut. Stick that one through here. You might have to play with the angle of the bumper a little bit to get it to bolt into place. Just finger tight will do. Then for this next one, you're going to need a washer and a nut on the other side, because this is that hole that we drilled out earlier. So go ahead and just take a washer on the back side for the middle piece of hardware there, with a locking nut. And just like that, you're all good for this side. Rinse and repeat for the driver's side. And then once we have, see if I can get a better angle, there we go. Once we have all 6 bolts, 3 for each side, and the center bolts in place, we're going to torque down these ones on the outside. After we torque down these ones on the outside, then we're going to go ahead and torque down the center ones. Don't forget to tighten these 2 bolts here. They're going to be 15 mils. Just remember, they're only on U-nuts, so you don't want to torque them too much. Just enough to stay tight. Now throw on your license plate and you're all good. So now that we have everything all bolted up, you're going to want to reconnect all the wiring for this bumper. So put your license plate lights back into place. Just like that. Same thing for the other side. Now put your trailer pin harness back on. Now hoist up that spare tire with the winch that we've already mounted up, and you've got yourself a full install right there.
So if you are looking for an affordable way to give your 09 to 18 Ram a little bit more altitude, be sure to check out this kit from Zone Offroad right here at AmericanTrucks.com.